Welcome into the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner. Ahmed, lots to get to on the show today. We're talking Terps basketball, football, recruiting. Maryland with a late pickup to their 2024 class. Let's start it off with the game from last night. Maryland falls and eats Lansing and drops yet another quad one opportunity to the Spartans.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, I think it was a disappointing beginning to start to that game yesterday. But I think, if any Maryland fan kind of told you that Julian Reese was going to finish with 2 points, played 14 minutes, and you would be in a one possession game largely for, maybe 35, 34 minutes, I think a lot of fans would be really content with that. But again, it just felt like this was a must-win game for Maryland to really get on the right side of the bubble. One possession, it was, 4 or 6 point game kind of throughout, but it was close, and Maryland did a really good job. But again, just felt like it was just too much in the end, and another tough road loss.
It is, and one thing that's becoming more and more evident and more feel like disappointing to watch this year is just how good Jahmir Young is. He puts up another 30-point plus performance on the road in conference play, and the rest of the supporting cast really just there isn't a supporting cast at this point for Maryland well into the second half with three scorers that end up picking up like Juju Reese's free throws in the end. That adds another player that enters the scorebook. But Dante Scott and Jahmir Young are putting up the performances that really at this point fans expected. Scott's really stepped up here down the stretch, both on the defensive end and with his three-point shooting, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. But Maryland, just whether it's Jamie Kaiser, Jahari Long, the guys that we saw play well against Nebraska, combined for 0 points in this one, and it shows.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think Jahmir, I think fans just saw how special he was last year, but the stretch that he's really put together since, the beginning, frankly, the beginning of the season, but feels like mid-December on has been remarkable. And obviously Dante Scott, it feels like ever since he kind of got settled into his new spot at the three, that was kind of when we saw his efficiency kind of take that next step. Obviously, I think the big thing with Saturday's loss is obviously Julian Reese. Like you said, playing 14 minutes, 2 points, added, like you said, Mason, added 2 free throws. Jahari Long added 2 free throws as well. So technically only 5 scores for Maryland, 3 players scored a field goal there. But again, Julian Reese picking up 2 fouls within the first 2:30 of the game. He came in, picked up his third foul 3.5 minutes later. 8 seconds into the second half, got called for another foul. So that really kind of took Maryland out of its element a little bit. Now, again, the defense really has not let down at all. And I think I saw Eric Hayes tweet it. It's hard to win when you're playing perfect defense, or when you need to play perfect defense in order to give yourself a chance to win. But that's kind of the case. Maryland's defense has kind of been that bread and butter over the last 4 or 5 weeks that's helped kind of, the offense kind of add some points along the way, whether it's a transition or, second chance points of winning, dominating the glass at times as well. But again, Julian Reese figuring out how to keep him on the floor, how to stay out of foul trouble has not been just a Willard issue. This is, year 3, and, this is far from the first, second, or third time we've had this discussion with him. But, the problem remains the same, like you said, just no supporting cast. After we saw Jamie Kaiser Jr. have a career day last weekend against Nebraska, very minimal production from him. And Deshaun Harris-Smith finished 0 for 3 from the field. Again, the freshman duo, what production has been from them has significantly hindered Maryland. But Julian Reese, just him not being available, and Jordan Geronimo having to fill in at the 5 really took Maryland out of the game plan, I thought.
It really did, and at some point it becomes the same thing as we talk during football season about with the personal fouls. When you become a guy that's known to foul, the referees know, and it's the same guys that are reffing these games. They're looking at Julian Reese as somebody that commits fouls, and at some point you have to do the same thing that Maryland ended up doing on the football side. You have to play a beyond clean game to not get away with that. And that's really tough. The refereeing of the game as a whole, which is one of the topics I wanted to get to, I felt like was poor, specifically in the moving screen. The moving screens are just apparently not a foul in the Big Ten. If you watch Wisconsin Purdue today, you saw the same thing. It went both ways. Jordan Geronimo's basically setting a moving screen every time Maryland's at the top of the key. I don't understand how that's never called. And Michigan State, they just play one of those brands of basketball, and that's become popular in the Big Ten, where they're going to foul you every time, and the rest just going to stop calling it eventually on your drives to the basket. And that's why talking conference wide, that's almost why these teams lose in March in the first weekend, because they get refs from another conference that don't ref the game the same way. But on that, I mean, Michigan State's game plan wise, their adjustments, the seal plays in the second half, which were called out on the broadcast pretty well by Robbie Hummel, just picking Maryland down and picking the Terps apart without Julian Reese in there, without a true second post presence to get out and block shots. Jordan Geronimo is a guy that you start to have to give credit to at this point in the season. I mean, for a while, it was sort of a zero out there on the court, but his effort, shot blocking, rebounding, basically doing the dirty work for Maryland here down the stretch, he's contributing. It's
Yeah,
one of those things where, again, you watch the team and you're like, they're one mediocre 3-point shooter away from doing something. A guy night in, night out that can, put up even high 20s or like mid 30s% from three and just makes the defense stretch a little bit, because Deshaun Harris-Smith, I mean, you don't have to guard him from the perimeter. You basically don't have to guard him on offense. He's giving away more points than he is scoring in the
yeah,
transition game. And when Jahari Long is not on, which he really hasn't been much on the road during his career, he's basically similar in that sense. And it goes for Jamie Kaiser too. Jamie Kaiser, he's getting better over time, but he's getting pushed around in the defensive end by the teams that are more kind of banging out in the post and don't have any perimeter shooting. And you just go down the list right now and you're like, if we get zero from, Julian Reese, Jamie Kaiser, Jahari Long, the chances that Maryland wins are about 15% at best, even with a guy that's putting up 30 a night.
yeah. I mean, again, I think Jordan Geronimo. I think it's been hit or miss. I looked it up. I mean, he's still, he's only posted 10 or more points once in the new year. And I think again, I think he struggled a little bit in the second half yesterday. I mean, Malik Hall, I think he did, I believe it was 14 of his 19 points came in the second half. And he was kind of able to find his groove, especially in the low block. And I thought Maryland kind of struggled to kind of adjust to that, especially with Julian Reese still struggling with the foul trouble, like we mentioned. But I think the development with Jamie Kaiser, I think, is the beginning of the season. His shots just felt so forced, and it's, I think in hindsight, maybe a little bit more natural, which is kind of considering freshman, just trying to get comfortable, figuring out his groove. And I think his shot selection and he's moving a little bit, just a lot more fluid within the offense. So I think that's kind of the development. But again, I think, like you said, with Deshaun Harris-Smith, what he's doing, giving away more points, you're still seeing way too much of him driving 50, 70% down into the paint. And then he's dishing it out with, it's a toss up, whether it's going to result in a turnover or not. So again, you're kind of, at this point where it's in February and, you don't want to deter confidence too much, obviously, with your freshman who, throw back to when Willard said he was the most talented freshman that he's ever seen. But so far right now, it's just really been tough for Maryland to get any production from him. And I think with Maryland not getting any production out of him, it's continued to put that strain on Jameer Young. It's why we continue to see, only 2-3 scorers for Maryland really emerge. And Jahari Long, I think that's kind of where he's been able to step up a little bit. But again, on Saturday, I thought both teams just really a good job defensively. And it felt like, when Maryland, Jameer Young had that reverse layup just over 7 minutes left to take that first lead of the game. It felt like Maryland was maybe kind of turned that tide until that 12-0 run.
Yeah, Michigan State again, maximum efficiency just for really two stretches in the game, late in the or middle of the first half when they kind of jumped out ahead, and then the Terps had to battle back, and then they finish it again with just 3-4 efficient point resulting offensive possessions. And Maryland just happened to run into a cold spell there at the end of the game where they don't find a point during that 12-0 run. I think when it comes to Deshaun Harris-Smith, I don't understand why he's not driving the basket more. He gets a little bit out of control, and it does result in turnovers a fair amount of times. But at some point, you would think if you're Kevin Willard or you're on that bench for Maryland, you look at what has become your two guard in the scenario who can handle the ball a little bit, and you say you have to find a way to get some sort of involvement, some sort of field goal production out of one of your starting five. And I mean, if you look down the stat sheet in this game, it's not like Jahari Long, who's out there for 30 minutes, who only attempts 2 field goals, both of them 3-pointers. It's a little bit like floor balance, but at the same time, in terms of production for Maryland, reliable guys like Dante Scott and Jameer Young, they combine. I believe they both end up shooting 12 threes in the game. Neither one of them are great 3-point shooters. Jameer Young goes 4 for 12. Dante Scott goes 3 for 12 in that case. And still a lot of bad offensive possessions where one of those two players ended up jacking up a three. And it's just, it's a step backwards from last year, especially with the post production.
Yeah, and again, I think Jameer Young, I think it felt like he just, again, just through that run, just felt like it just got away from Maryland really fast, and once it did, just felt like the Michigan State it took complete control, and there was really no. I don't want to say no hope for Maryland, but it felt very apparent that Maryland was not going to be able to avenge that loss from 2 weeks ago, which is a disappointing outcome. Obviously, coming off of a week bye, and I'm really I don't try and dive into press conferences too much, but hearing Willard talk about just they weren't kind of comfortable or whatnot, and they it's too long of a break. And Jameer needs to he's more of a rhythm guy. I don't know. It felt like right before the Nebraska game, we heard a lot about how the players were tired and traveling and things like that. So I think that was a little bit disappointing to hear post game. But again, like we said to start the show, I mean, Merrill needed this game in order to really entrench themselves on the right side of the bubble. Not that this win would get them in that bubble conversation, but definitely gives them a chance. Quad one win on the road, obviously, a top 25 team in the net rankings. But again, Maryland will have to figure out a way to do or to pick up those results elsewhere.
Yeah, let's take a look at that, Ahmed. The Terps fall to 2-5 in quad one opportunities on the season. They remain 2-2 in quad two, 2-2 in quad three, and then 7 quad four wins for the Terps. They'll get 2 more opportunities, one a quad three at home against the 104th ranked Rutgers Scarlet Knights in their net ranking. Really disappointing year in Piscataway, but ultimately a tough team, and Terps going to have to take care of business on Tuesday. Then a quad one opportunity on the road at a really, really struggling Ohio State team who dropped the game at Iowa Friday night at the end. Another close loss for Chris Holtman's squad, who again struggling now in conference play. I believe they're 3-8 in the conference at this point. So Maryland with 2 solid opportunities coming up.
Yeah, I think the Nebraska, the Rutgers game. I think just a chance for Maryland to really get back on track. I mean, again, back at home, I think this Maryland team, even though the result of Saturday's game obviously didn't go right, I think this Maryland team is playing a lot better than they were 3 4 weeks ago. And I think that they are playing a much better clip right now than this Rutgers team. But granted, Rutgers is coming off what feels like the latest team to hand Michigan a comeback win after Michigan collapses in the second half. But again, I think that Maryland has a chance to do so. Get back in the win column there and back to 500 in conference play. Yeah, and I think obviously they'll get a chance to take on Ohio State this weekend. And again, that's a 50-50 matchup. Ohio State's not playing their best basketball right now, so we'll see what Maryland team is able to show up. Obviously, they've been able to do a little bit better on the road this year, but toss up. But again, that margin for error for Maryland is slim. Then going into the 2 really last chance matchups for Maryland, I think it's not a stretch to call both these games must win.
Yeah, I would argue the next 3 are must win. You add that Iowa home game onto the end of these next 3, gives you a chance to get some momentum going into the matchups at home against Illinois, and then the road game when Maryland heads to Wisconsin. But you said it, there's the margin for error is gone. This was a great opportunity to pick up a road quality win for Maryland, start to stack up some road wins in that quad one category. That opportunity obviously does not come to fruition. You're looking really down the barrel right now. If you're Maryland, you've got to find a way to pick up 5, 6, to probably pick up 7 more wins in the rest of the way. And you can look at it and say that there is a chance for that. Maryland's got to start to cash in, but it's game in, game out. You're in some ways you can see this team getting hot and making a run, but they're also, one nicked up Jameer Young away from probably, reversing that record and maybe winning only 2 or 3 more the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, if Jameer Young goes out, you probably put the over under at 1.5 wins the rest of the way. I think that'd be tough, just based on really the production and the just the way that Maryland leans on Jameer Young to pretty much do everything. So, but yeah, obviously we'll see. And then, again, Maryland be disappointing if Maryland isn't able to get back. But I think it's, again, not a stretch to say that Maryland also needs to figure out a way to win against Illinois and win at Wisconsin. Again, that win at Illinois, of course, a signature win and the lone signature win for Maryland, but still comes without Terrence Shannon. So I think a chance for Maryland to pick up another quality win gives them some hope.
Yeah, it definitely does. Let's flip over to the football side. And Ahmed, there is never a dull week when you're covering Mike Locksley on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, football recruiting is definitely a beast in itself. But Maryland added another 2024 commit. And if you've been following on Inside the Black and Gold, you've had a good idea that this was coming. That Maryland's been in hot pursuit ever since Azar Abdul-Rahim came aboard in St. Francis. Four-star fringe, four-star cornerback Kevin Humes, 5'11", 175-pound corner. He'll enroll in June as well. But Maryland committed to Maryland over Syracuse. Also had Penn State, Florida, Notre Dame, USC in that top group as well. But again, I thought this was a guy that was kind of unsure if Maryland was going to make a run. I think Maryland did a really good job. They liked him and he graded high. But once he made his decision to reclassify from a 2025 to 2024 prospect, Maryland was kind of on the cusp of a position, coaching change at that position. But I think again, once Azar Abdul-Rahim came aboard, Maryland really never wavered in their pursuit. The lone official visit that Humes took was to Syracuse. The Penn State, Notre Dame, USC officials. I've seen that some graphic surface on Twitter, and none of that is accurate. So none of those visits materialized because Humes took a pair of unofficial visits to Maryland for the Michigan State game, Nebraska game, and then he returned this past weekend for his official visit. So again, 5'11", 175 pounds. I think he fits in as a nickel corner, and Humes, I think he's a guy. If you talk to guys over at St. Francis, was among the fastest guys, if not the fastest guy on the St. Francis roster. So when you talk about adding speed to that secondary room, Humes definitely fits that as well. So another corner that Maryland adds, and then Humes should be signing alongside St. John's safety Shamar McIntosh this Wednesday, February 7th, and that should be the end of the 2024 cycle for Maryland.
Yeah, it's been our position of need that you and I have been talking about a lot on this show. Does that mean portal wise, I can still see Maryland taking a look at what's available in the defensive backfield?
As of Sunday night, I no longer would expect Maryland to make a run at potential spring portal guys. I think that as of now, it's just too tight of a turnaround. The ad drop deadline is on Tuesday, and I think just kind of the logistics of it at this point, I think that's just it's going to be too tight, too tough. But again, offensive linemen, I think it's offensive tackle, whether it's left or right. That's a priority position of focus. Defensive lineman, corner, tight end as well. Matthew Hibner, I've mentioned him a bunch over the last 5-6 weeks or so. So all names to know for Maryland there, but I think potentially we see that next wave of targets emerge through spring ball, through the next wave of portal entries.
And AG, we keep the high school train rolling into the 2025 class, huge DMV class, and Loxley getting active this weekend.
Yeah, this was a weird weekend. It sounded like there wasn't. So Tom Lemming had a photo shoot. He's done it historically in years past, hosted at DeMatha, and have guys come over to Maryland one-on-one, and usually ends up being a pretty chaotic day. And sounded like that was kind of on the table, and then ended up materializing. But Maryland did end up hosting a couple of guys on campus. Wise defensive end Trent Wilson made it up. Good counsel trio, Fahim Delaney. Offensive lineman, or Fahim Delaney's 5-star safety. I've said it again. If you're following Inside the Black and Gold, I think he's the best defensive prospect out in Maryland since Chase Young. I think he's that good. Obviously Trent Wilson, and then out of good counsel as well. You had a pair of offensive linemen, interior lineman Gavin Crawford, and then towering tackle, 6'8" tackle, Aiden Buchanan. So. And then Gianni Contosis from Rock Creek, wide receiver as well. All those guys made their way to campus, but again, nothing too crazy. I know we've seen weeks past. Last weekend, Salt Lake, Washington, and the Spalding guys make their way to campus. The week before, they hosted guys for the Michigan State game as well. So, like you said, it's never been a dull moment for recruiting. They keep me busy, but I think this 2025 class, the way that Maryland's kind of approach recruiting them the last 3-4 months, I think Maryland has a chance to really lay a really good foundation. Obviously, Azar Abdul Rahim comes in. Everybody knows about what he can do with local recruiting ties. And I think that he's going to really try to emphasize keeping some of this lockdown talent home. So, chance for Maryland to secure, said it before, and I'll say it again, what I think could be Mike Loxley's best class from top to bottom as head coach of the Maryland Terrapins.
And Ahmed has all of your insider notes and news over on Inside the Black and Gold. Ahmed Locke's also breaking Twitter this weekend with his, I guess you call it a small acquisition for a guy that has coached and made the kind of dollars that Locks has, but his Terp script for GT.
Yeah, that was nice. That was nice. Yeah, I saw you did a car advertisement today. I think you posted it on Instagram. So yeah, whatever's getting those NIL dollars rolling, man.
Yeah. Ahmed, anything else to add? Busy week coming up for the Terps.
Yeah, again, we'll see how Maryland responds back in action Tuesday. Both the men and women's team taking on Rutgers, 6:30 to 8:30 tip off. So, and as always, we will have all the latest football coverage, posted some notes on some additional intel on some of these visitors from this weekend. And yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah, and as always, make sure to subscribe to the podcast where you get it. Give us a thumbs up and a review where you can. For Ahmed Gafir, I am Mason Viner. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.